All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our 11th Harness and Drone meetup. My name is Dave Nielsen, and I'm the head of the Harness and Drone community. And we're excited today to hear about Harness Security Testing Orchestration. You probably saw the news yesterday that was announced. It is now in general availability. And we've got two great speakers here to help you understand what service testing orchestration is, or STO is, and also see a quick demo of how it works. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Jim Hirschauer. He's the platform marketing, or he's a senior director of platform marketing at Harness, and also Dan Flores, who is a sales engineer also at Harness. So with that, Jim, why don't we turn it over to you?
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. Hey, everybody. My name is Jim Hirschauer, and just so you're all aware, for many years, I was an IT practitioner. I'm on the marketing side of things now, and a lot of the pain that I talk about in this presentation is pain that I've personally experienced or witnessed other folks experience in their IT careers for many, many years. So it should be an interesting conversation today. And what I want to make sure we set up right away is that if you have any questions or comments, or you need more clarification as I'm going through this presentation, please feel free to interrupt. Okay, I want to make sure that we have an interactive conversation here and you get any of your questions addressed immediately. So just like in a normal meetup style, feel free to go ahead and ask anything at an appropriate time. So I've got a title on the screen here: Improving Application Security While Achieving High Velocity Software Delivery. And that's a pretty long title. And as I was thinking about that, I thought, that's exactly what Harness Security Testing Orchestration was built for. But quite honestly, we could just as easily call this presentation How to Win at DevSecOps. Okay, so that's going to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. Just for people's knowledge, our security testing orchestration module, it did go GA yesterday. So we're very excited to have that software generally available at this time. So quick agenda here. I'm going to talk about the common goals and challenges within software delivery, and at a high level and quickly. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that. Then we're going to spend some time talking about shifting security testing left. So in particular, application security testing. And then we'll jump right into a demo. Dan is going to go ahead and do a demo, and then we'll do some Q&A after that. So when we talk about the things that are valuable to folks in the industry, there's four main buckets that we like to think about: velocity, governance, quality, and efficiency. And IT organizations and most companies are focused on these four things from many different perspectives. And when it comes to application security testing, there's a few things that I think about. First of all, time to market. So application security testing, typically when people think about it, they think about actually slowing down velocity and slowing down your time to market. But it's an important aspect of delivering software and making sure that everyone is having the experience that they're expecting with your software. And companies are being responsible with the software and protecting the information of those users. With that, there's a governance capability of setting, defining, and enforcing security standards. So making sure that as software delivery pipelines are running, that everybody in the company is being held accountable and held to the same standards for making sure they're using whatever the approved security scanners are and following those security policies. And then, once that software actually gets deployed, released into some environment for the users, of course, then we want it to be as secure as it possibly can be at that point in time. And there are multiple ways to try and make sure that you secure software. And I'll talk about those different methodologies today. And then from an efficiency perspective, one of the major pain points is toil. So just repetitive tasks that hopefully or probably should be automated, but tend to not get automated. And in DevSecOps, there's some interesting toil that is being created these days via DevSecOps practices that we're going to go ahead and talk about that and how to mitigate that. Now, what's the real problem? Okay, so the real problem, as I see it, is that when velocity increases, so as you're trying to deploy software faster, the number of security vulnerabilities tends to go up due to that speed, right? It's we tend to use lots of reusable libraries, and as we're going fast, we can introduce security vulnerabilities, and that's far from ideal, but there's a good way to fix this. And that's by using application security testing methodologies across all the various pipeline stages. And that really is kind of the premise of DevSecOps, to shift what was traditional AppSec doing security testing towards the end of the software delivery lifecycle, and shift all of that earlier in the lifecycle. Now, that comes with a price, unfortunately. And we'll talk about that in just a minute, but there's a lot of considerations when you are looking at DevSecOps. So when you're going to embrace DevSecOps across the entire software delivery lifecycle, many things that have to be taken into consideration. How much of that can you or should you automate? There's significant differences from company to company that we speak to in their automation capabilities and how far they've gone in automating DevSecOps. But lots of different things have to be considered. In particular, some really difficult ones are things like cultural change. Right? How do you actually get people to agree that it's a good idea to shift left these security tasks and add more workload to your developers, right, who already have significant level of workload? So lots of things to consider, lots of things to think about when implementing DevSecOps. And there's definitely some significant challenges that we're seeing across all of the folks that we talk to about their DevSecOps practices. And this is some of the lessons learned out of our conversations. So with DevSecOps, there's certainly great power in DevSecOps, being able to run application security scanners throughout the software delivery pipelines. But we're starting to see that there's this overload of different scanning tools. So with so many different scanning tools, they're all creating different sets of output. And it's really up to the developers to look at that output and to process that output and figure out what are true vulnerabilities? Are there any duplicates? And figure out how to resolve those vulnerabilities. It's very hard for anyone who's looking at this data to go ahead and try and aggregate that data and to create a proper prioritization on, hey, what is absolutely critical that you fix right now versus what maybe can we go to production with where it's really not such a big deal, right? In addition to that, after you've gone ahead and fixed those vulnerabilities, there has to be some sort of verification process those fixes were actually implemented. And then you also have to be able to look at that as you deploy over and over again to make sure that there's not some sort of regression. And, one of the most difficult parts of DevOps and DevSecOps is really that collaboration and communication between these teams that still may be siloed, right? Application security still tends to be, siloed and separate from the development organization in many of the companies that we speak to today. So lots of different challenges when you're actually going ahead and implementing DevSecOps. And in traditional application security methodologies, the AppSec team tends to run application security scanners right about when you're deploying to prod, right? It's during the deployment process. So it's either maybe right in an environment right before prod or right after you get to prod. Security is going to go ahead and run those vulnerability scans and create a list of vulnerabilities and ship that list back to the developers, often via Excel spreadsheets. And those developers, they have to stop what they're doing, right? They've moved on after they've shipped that code. They've moved on and they have to stop what they're doing and try and figure out, okay, well, what do we do about these security vulnerabilities and how can we go ahead and make sure that we address all these security vulnerabilities? Often it's really difficult to address them after you've already shipped the code because you've built some libraries in that could be difficult to unwind at that point in the life cycle. So lots of potential issues with this delayed feedback loop, this delayed methodology of understanding what security vulnerabilities exist. So a potentially better way of doing this is with a continuous feedback loop. And that's really what we've created at Harness, is this continuous feedback loop. And with continuous feedback loop, the point is to go ahead and run vulnerability scans at every stage along the CI/CD pipeline and pump all of the results from all of the different scanners into a single engine. And that single engine will then go ahead and do all of the heavy work, the heavy lifting, all of the processing that is normally a manual process by developers. That all gets processed within this engine. And so there's data normalization, data deduplication, and then a prioritization. You get a prioritized list that gets presented back to the developers so that they can fix issues that are popping up, security vulnerabilities that are popping up at every step of the software delivery lifecycle, with the ultimate goal of making it a much faster overall process. If they can resolve security vulnerabilities as they're being created, it's much faster for them to resolve those than after the fact, after they've already deployed to production and have moved on to creating new functionality. So I want to quickly set the stage. This is my last slide before the demo. I want to quickly set the stage for what Harness STO is. There's two different ways to think about STO. On the left-hand side, we have standalone security testing orchestration. Oh, and one thing I do want to make clear is that Harness is not a security scanner in and of itself. We do not create security scanners. There are many on the market today, but we're the orchestrator. So we work with those leading security scanners, and we make sure they get executed and run against the software that developers are delivering. Right. And so when we think about standalone Harness STO, well, this is that ability to do security testing orchestration and automate that. We want to be able to provide a unified view, a unified single pane of glass that both the application security folks and the development and engineering team and the DevSecOps group, if there is a group in the organization that's responsible for DevSecOps, everyone can then work off this shared set of data because we're providing these enterprise level dashboards and reports that provide the right perspective for the right user. So the security team has their perspective that they want to see. That's a very different perspective than the developers need to see, right? But it's going to be off of the same data. Really importantly is this configurable governance. So to be able to set security policies, right, to make sure everyone is running the application security scanners that the company has defined are important to run, and also to make sure that the company is defining a standard for what's acceptable for your pipeline to actually continue, right? So that you can deploy your software. If you have critical vulnerabilities, any vulnerabilities marked as critical, you probably don't want that pipeline to succeed and put those into production. So you can have a policy that set that make sure that pipeline does not proceed. And then you would have to get some advanced approval that Dan is going to show you in the demo. Right. Enterprise grade audit trails and RBAC. That is one of the things that comes with every Harness module. So there should be no surprise for anyone that knows Harness. And then with the integration with CI/CD, this is where things get interesting, right? Having those guardrails where you can run the various tests in the CI phase. You can run the various scanners in the CD phase. And you're going to have guardrails in place that look at the policies that have been established and say either, yes, you can continue, or no, you can't continue. And you're going to need some more advanced authorization. All right. So Harness standalone STO, it does integrate with other CI/CD solutions. Just get that out of the way right away. So whether you're using Harness CI/CD or some other CI/CD solution, you definitely want to be looking at Harness STO for both of those use cases. All right, so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dan. Dan's going to go ahead and actually show you the solution. And again, if you do have questions, feel free to either interrupt on the WebEx or go ahead in the chat and ask your question there, and I'll be monitoring the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Jim. So sort of to iterate some things. And first of all, my name is Dan Flores. To Jim's point, please interrupt me as needed, ask questions via chat or speak up. But I do want to reiterate some points that Jim just made. Right, one, we just officially GA'd this yesterday, so a lot of what I'll be showing is sort of a first look into not just what's implemented in the demo, but what's to come. Right, showing you sort of a little bit of the art of the possible. I also want to re-highlight what Jim just said, that STO is not a security scanner. Right, we are in fact integrating with security scanners you already heavily invested in. We will orchestrate them. We will aggregate the data, normalize that data, deduplicate all that disparate data while adding a layer of governance on top of it. Right, and the last item that I want to preface with as I'm beginning to share my screen is the fact that STO, very much like all the other harness solutions, can be consumed independently. Yes, you will get some sort of extra benefits from consuming multiple harness solutions, but STO can be a standalone service. It can be executed in an ad hoc manner. It can be executed in a scheduled manner. It can interface with other CI solutions like GitHub Actions, GitLabs, etc. But with that in mind, let me very quickly touch on some of those common problems that are prevalent in this DevSecOps space. Jim, you did a great job covering. I just want to sort of re-highlight the fact that there are two sort of main workflows that I see when having conversations with customers, right? First of all, what's happened is organizations have already invested in the security scanners, right? Your Aquas, Checkmarks, SNCCs, white sources, right? What we're seeing is that these are often run manually, right? Or in a standalone fashion. And the reason for that is because the orchestration, the integration of these security scanners, right? Automating that entire end-to-end workflow, it's not a trivial task, right? What we then see sometimes is that even if you have orchestrated the execution of the scanner within your CI/CD pipelines, oftentimes the feedback, the actual insights into the findings is sort of missing, right? Which gives you a sort of a siloed visibility, which we'll touch upon in a bit. And ultimately, what's lacking is a security-first approach, which increases your risk profile and negatively impacts your velocity as well as your developer feedback loop. I'm not going to touch on the delayed feedback loop because Jim, you did an amazing job, right? As Jim stated, this is more of a traditional workflow, more of an AppSec dedicated workflow that impacts your velocity and also your risk, right? The velocity because there's a lot of rework being involved along each step along your SDLC. And high risk because security is usually not introduced until the later stages of your SDLC. Now, what we often see is another workflow, one where organizations which are more modern, which have already bought into the shift left mantra, right? They have managed to shift the execution of a lot of these SDLC items to the left, right? What that translates to is your functional testing occurs earlier on, your unit testing occurs earlier on, security testing, your SaaS, DAST, software composition analysis occurs as soon as possible, which really translates to it occurs at the CI level. What this actually means for the developers is the developer's job is now more complex because we've taken essentially 90% of the SDLC cycle and we've put it on the developers, right? And what we're seeing here is that developers are still expected to do their day-to-day, which is very coding centric. Their KPIs, right, mostly revolve around feature releases. But as the builds happen, as this security scans happen, the developer is expected to go from the Black Dog web app to the Veracode web app to X, Y, and Z web app to analyze all the raw findings, to internalize them, to prioritize them, and to remediate them, right? So the amount of context switching that developers are experiencing obviously impacts the developer productivity, but what we're seeing too is that this process lacks governance, right? And it's oftentimes, it can be skipped because ultimately security and SecOps teams are still responsible for ensuring that no CVEs are introduced to these higher level environments. What we're trying to do with STO is, yes, we're trying to shift left security, right? But not just from the execution perspective, from the analysis perspective, from the governance perspective, from the remediation perspective. And we're ensuring that these security steps are not semi-optional, right? We're going with a security first approach, where, again, Harness STO can help you execute this, whether you are a more modern organization, which already has embedded security scanners as part of your CI, or you are still following a process where security takes place later in the SDLC. But with that in mind, let's go ahead and shift over to the Harness platform. As mentioned, we just GA'd yesterday. So what I first want to highlight is, regardless of what Harness solution you utilize, right, whether it's STO standalone, as you can see, I'm currently in CI, we will always follow a security first approach where you will have an STO preview, right, a security profile preview of any CVEs that were found in any execution. Now, as you can see, these are a couple of days old, so we don't have any STO executions. So what I'm going to do actually is shift to an end-to-end pipeline that certainly has quite a couple versions of the STO implementation in it. I'm seeing a comment in the chat very quickly. Okay, it's just Jim. Okay, so with that in mind, as mentioned, what we're seeing here is an end-to-end pipeline. We are seeing everything that has occurred from code all the way to deploying an artifact into production. Now, I don't want to focus on the CI step, the CD step. What we're going to focus on is on each of the steps that have a shield on them, right? These are the STO steps. And what we're seeing here is that we have two versions of this. One where we have embedded STO as part of our CI step or CI stage, and another implementation of STO where it's a standalone stage where we are actually utilizing this as a pre-production deployment security / quality gate check. Now, a question that we often get as we're running this in a more holistic fashion, right, across CI/CD is, why would we run a security gate check if we know for a fact we've already run all the security scans earlier on, right? We already shifted it left. Why run them again? And the reason for this is this will differ in accordance to your maturity, all right? But what's happening in the CI step could be a day old. It could be a couple of weeks old, right? In accordance to your own organizational standards, your own deployment windows. Maybe the artifact that you created 2 weeks ago was risk-free, right? But as everybody who's used, these security scanners is aware of, these CVE databases change or can change dramatically day over day. So another way that we can implement STO is by ensuring, right, yet another quality or security gate is embedded in order to not introduce these high-risk artifacts into, let's say, production. But with that in mind, let's first focus on the orchestration aspect, right? The security testing orchestration. What we're seeing here is that as part of the CI workflow, we are embedding STO in sequential steps, in parallel executions. But what we're doing is, in this particular case, is integrating with Fortify, OWASP, Aqua, check marks, and a couple other security scans. As far as STO goes, we currently cover 40+ different security scans or security scanners, and we are evolving in that manner, right? We are integrating with more scanners month over month, quarter over quarter. But what I want to highlight, and what I always like to sort of showcase, is executions themselves. And that's because in a previous lifetime, I was in the APM, in the logging space. I actually tend to see that a lot of the value can be explained by the logs themselves. So let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit so that nobody's straining their eyes. And as part of this execution, we're seeing that we're orchestrating several scanners. But what I want to highlight here is what a developer might have to deal with, right? Outside of having to maybe log into the Fortify app or the Black Duck app, what developers are normally faced with is raw issues, right? And for this specific execution, what we actually see is that when Fortify ran, right, with STO, STO found 9 raw issues. But after the normalization, after the deduplication, right, we were able to reduce that count by 72%. And what the developer will see, right, via the security test later on when I shift towards that view, is only 2 issues, right? What we want to do here is, of course, increase developer productivity. We want to minimize the noise. We want to make sure that if something breaks or if something is introduced, that the developer has that immediate insight so that they can take immediate action on that. The other item regarding the execution that I want to touch on is related to this sort of red flag that we see here where it says failed, right? And Jim actually touched on this a little bit. Now, I do want to highlight that this actually did not fail because the orchestration failed. As you can see, once again, within the logs, is that the orchestration very much gave us results, right? An issue count of 4, etc. However, the reason why this failed is because this particular OWASP step has, so you can see here, it fails on severity of high or greater, right? So in this particular case, we found 2 criticals, 2 critical CVEs, which means that this should fail on severity. In a regular workflow, this would actually cause your pipeline to break. But as mentioned earlier, I use this pipeline for demo purposes, not just for STO, but also for CI, CD, etc. So we forced it to keep going via some advanced failure strategies. With that in mind, though, I do want to touch on sort of that idea of failing or breaking pipelines or ensuring that certain things happen, right? And Jim, thank you for touching on the policy or the governance aspect. As we can see by going into security tests, is that Harness has embedded the concept of policies really across the entire platform. Right here, we see this concept of policy violations. And right here, we actually see the concept of policy evaluations, right? And how we do that actually is via this policy section that I have over here. What we have done is we have embedded OPA or open policy agents across our entire platform. And we can actually use these policies across a holistic Harness platform, across each individual solution, right? And for anybody who's not familiar with an open policy agent, it's a CNCF-backed product. It's sort of the new standard for policy as code that allows you to accept and deny and essentially put specific guardrails via the regular language, right? And what this translates and how we've actually seen it be implemented for some customers is the ability to enforce or ensure certain sequence of events happen, right? If you are utilizing STO as part of, let's say, your CI workflow, right? What Harness can do is allow you to approach really application delivery via a self-service motion in a distributed DevOps fashion, where we offer developers golden steps, or we offer developers golden pipelines, right? And in this whole build your own pipeline model, as mentioned earlier, developers can have the ability to simply not include a security scan, right? They can just simply clone it, build it, push it, and bypass the entire security process. So via these policies, right, we can enforce that if you are utilizing Harness CI, right, and this can be Harness CI standalone, or this can be Harness CI with something like GitHub Actions as well. If you're using Harness CI with GitHub Actions, you need to include a SonarQube scan, an Aqua scan, an OWASP scan. If this is not in place, we can break the pipeline. We can disallow you or take away the functionality of saving. And these policy evaluations can actually happen at runtime as well, right? Or earlier on, I mentioned that the OWASP specific step had a condition to fail on severity X, right? And that's, again, very specific to OWASP, but via policies, You could say something more conditional, like maybe for dev environments, we do allow all security scanners to introduce high risk or severity high CVEs. But again, if this evaluations happen on runtime and STO is attempting to do this check before a production type deployment, right, we can break that pipeline. So with that in mind, I'm going to take a quick pause here. This OPA-based governance is very unique to Harness, especially the ability to execute these policy evaluations on runtime. It's certainly something different that I've ever seen before in other implementations. So I want to take a pause there and open up the floor for questions if there are any.
Okay, folks, if you have any questions about what we've seen so far, please feel free to either unmute yourself and speak up, or you can put it right in the chat. I know that you may need a moment or two to think of some questions. I do want to share with you that I don't know if you caught it earlier, but there is a shortcut URL if you want to find more about STO. You can just go to harness.io/STO and you'll be directed to a page that gives you a summary of the product. At this point, I don't see any questions, Dan, so I think we can continue moving on. And if you do have a question, please go ahead and type it into the chat window and we'll see it and we'll take a break and answer your question. So go ahead. Dan.
So what I want to actually move on to now is, again, that sort of developer feedback loop where we can prevent the developers from going to many different web apps, right? The Black Duck web app, the Veracode web app, etc. So in the case where a pipeline may have broken, again, the developer can just go to this security test section to see the reason why it broke. But what we're doing here, right, as beyond the orchestration, is also aggregating all the results, as you can see here. We're also prioritizing the results by severity. And furthermore, we will also give the developers the ability to have a baseline, right? So in a real workflow where this might be embedded into your CI, maybe this pipeline was triggered via a PR. So you will be able to see the brand new PR branch in relevance to your main branch, right? What CVEs you remediated, as well as, of course, what brand new CVEs you introduced as part of your code changes. From the duplication perspective, we actually do this at 2 levels, right? Earlier, I sort of highlighted that for 4 to 5, for example, we went from 9 counts to 2 counts, right? So that's one way that we can look at it. But what I usually like to highlight is this log4j example, because the CVE everybody's at least a little bit familiar with. So in the case where maybe SonarQube and Aqua and OWASP all detected this log4j core CVE, what would happen is we would minimize the noise and give visibility into this CVE at a single entry point for the developer, right? So here the developer will have the ability to access any relevant CVE data from the actual cve.org website, as well as get insights into every occurrence that happened before, right? And that's what we saw in that Fortify log execution, where here the developer will know exactly the file path where this was introduced, right? This was part of our POM file. So again, me being a developer, I would say, okay, I know where to change this, but what do I change it to, right? So as we go through all these deduplicated occurrences, right, and we can go through several of them in a single view, we will also have a description which lets us know how, and let me zoom in here, how to remediate this, right? So in this particular issue, we can see that the log4j related CVE exists in any versions that are 2.0 alpha through 2.16. So what we have to do then, from the POM file perspective, right, from the dependency perspective, is ensure that we are using a version above 2.16. The name of the game for this screen, right, for this section of STO mid-execution is ensuring that all the actionability is presented to the developer, right? We live in a world where while security controls a certain aspect of the SDLC, DevOps engineers control a different aspect of the SDLC. When it comes to application creation, when it comes to CVEs found at the application level, we fully rely on the developer. So we want to make sure that all that information is easily accessible, easily actionable, so that they can take that immediate action and therefore increase velocity and minimize risk. I'm going to once again take another pause. This section has been mainly dedicated to the developer experience, right? But I do want to shift towards some screenshots that showcase some more security or SecOps persona based approaches. But once again, before I move on to that, let me go ahead and take a quick pause and check with Jim and Dave to see if there's any questions in the chat.
Okay, I don't see any additional questions in the chat. Again, folks, if you have any questions, feel free to put them right in the chat, or you can speak up right now. But I don't see anything right now, so I think we're good to keep going.
Perfect. All right, so actually I will touch on this portion during the screenshots. Now, as just mentioned, we just GA'd, right? So I haven't had a chance to set this up on my demo environment, but I took a couple screenshots from a QA and other sort of pieces where we have tested this out. But what we will give for SecOps personas, for even PMs, right? People that own entire projects and maybe not just specific services and applications, is visibility into the entirety of baselines or baseline issues over time, right? We want you to see what your really security profile, your risk profile is on a project level, on a business unit level, holistically across anything or any STO based implementation, where you can see your active tests, your failed tests, reasons why they fail. And in relevance to that, tying failures of executions, right? The developer will have the ability to raise exceptions, right? So from the SecOps point of view, what we're going to give is sort of a security control plane where that SecOps persona, in this case, Andrew Adams, can review all the exceptions that exist holistically across many tools and have the ability to take a look at the issue, take a look at the reason for the exception. Let's say in this case that something in production is going very wrong and the developer needs to make a change to ensure a hot fix gets delivered into production and it has a CVE, right? So as a security professional, again, you might be wary of this, but because it's a production impacting issue, you might say, I approve this for the next 24 hours, right? So again, we want to give you a centralized control plane of your whole security exceptions that would normally exist independently across each security scanner. And last but not least, something that is sort of native to Harness and really exists outside of STO. Harness does have dashboarding capabilities. Our dashboard is actually based on Google's Looker. For anyone who's not familiar with Looker, it's an extremely flexible BI tool that allows you really to create any visualization you want, any sort of tables, graphs, so that you can generate really complex dashboards. So what we've done sort of as part of this initial release and what we'd like to do for all our solutions is, yes, give our users the flexibility to create their own dashboards, but we also like to have out-of-the-box visualizations where our users can get insightful, meaningful data of each solution that they're consuming. So what we're seeing here is sort of a V1 of our first STO dashboard, as it's called, right? Where we can very quickly see what our profile looks like, right? How many findings we have, how our security has been trending, what the criticality is right across our entire holistic STO implementation, as well as getting insights into which security scanner normally detects most of your CVEs, maybe which teams are responsible for introducing most of those CVEs. And as I'm sort of thinking about this right now, right, how this can evolve, is we should also be able to give you, right, in a use case where you're using something like Harness CD, we should be able to give you what your security profile looks like on an environment by environment basis, right? What we can also do is these dashboards are often used in the CD and CI space for keeping track of your DORA metrics, right? Keeping track of your deployment frequency, your failure rate, etc. So maybe a potential future dashboard here could also be, how does your deployment frequency compare in relation to your security or risk profile, right? As you're deploying more frequently, are you introducing more CVEs? So essentially, right, to sort of wrap this whole thing up, STO really is here to help you improve DevSecOps, regardless of where you are regarding your maturity of the security space, right? Whether you are introducing the SDLC currently in your higher level environments, whether you've already began shifting your security in your CI space, right? And we're doing this by ensuring that developer productivity increases, by ensuring that the developers have instant actionability to all these results generated by the security scanners. And at the same time, we will be giving holistic visibility into your entire ecosystem for the SecOps persona to ensure that your higher level environments are not currently at risk of being exposed to some CVE. With that in mind, once again, Dave, I'm going to pass it over to you, as well as Jim, and see if there's any questions or comments based on the given presentation.
Okay, we do have one question here. It is asking about exporting the data. Specifically, it says, is there a way to automate the export of DORA-related data into our own dashboards?
So a way to automate the export of DORA-related data into, so right now what we base the data on is the utilization of our own solutions, right? So if you're using, let's say, Harness CD for deployment, we will be able to capture all that data, visualize it, etc. We can then certainly export it via APIs, via spreadsheets to any sort of platform if you want to. But the way that we see this right now is that Harness is not a BI solution, right? Harness is incorporating a pre-existing BI solution such as Looker to ensure that you have visibility into everything that's occurring.
Okay. All right. So folks, if you have any other questions, please go ahead and type them into the chat, or again, you can unmute yourself at this time and ask it yourself. So why don't we give them one last moment to ask questions before we sign off? Do anybody, Jim, Dan, you have any last words you want to share with the audience here?
I will say that I've already seen STO go through many iterations, right? As with all of our products, we are ever evolving, right? And we're always partnering up with customers to develop this in a direction that can not just help those customers, but the entire market.
Great. And I think we need to get that short URL for all our other products too. It's kind of nice to be able to just say harness.io/STO and it just takes you right there. I think we've got it for SCM as well, but not the other. So that's one thing on my to-do list. Anyway, all right. So I don't see any other questions at this point. I think we can go ahead and sign off. I just want to thank everyone for joining. We will be posting this video online to the Harness YouTube channel. So if you just go to YouTube and search for Harness Meetup, you'll find it there. And let's see, anything else? We will have another technology we'll be announcing soon that will be also scheduling a meetup talk for the next couple weeks. So stay tuned for more exciting news coming to you on through our Harness Meetup virtual channel. Again, thanks a lot, Dan. Thanks, Jim. Really appreciate you guys coming on here and spending some time with us to let us know about this new exciting technology. I know there's a lot of people who are excited about being able to take advantage of this integration that we make with other security tools to make it easier for everyone to shift left and make deployment better. So thank you very much. Okay, folks, that's it. We'll see you the next time.
Thanks all. Take care.